Joy Alford-Brand, I'm excited to talk to you because I have so much respect for the work and research you've been doing on helping people around money, responsibility, either personal or their business. And I want to talk about PPP, Payroll Protection Plan.
Well, thanks, Martin, for having me on your platform. I really appreciate it. And as you know, I'm a sort of recovering bankruptcy attorney. So as we go into the coronavirus economic fallout and we continue into it, I've been paying close attention to all the legislation that's been passed. And of course, the CARES Act sort of didn't really kick things off. There were a couple of bills in front of that, but the CARES Act contained the Paycheck Protection Program. And it was it was legislation that was passed so quickly. And just for me, as a small business owner myself, I really felt like it's important for me to get a handle on that and understand how it works. Even though I'm not going to participate in the Paycheck Protection Program, I know a lot of small business owners who are also attorneys and who are just members of, different groups that I'm in, who are going to need some kind of information on this, because whenever legislation is passed quickly, it's hard to implement it in a way that's going to protect you as the small business owner going forward. So of course, I've been reading it, I've been working on it, and I've been putting together presentations on it. And last week, we had a new piece fall into place. So that's something that I've been working on too, but I'm just happy to point folks in the right direction, because again, my interest is to help protect micro businesses, small business owners, sole proprietors, so that they're making good decisions in the long run. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
When I'm talking about this information, I'm not giving legal advice. That's not my intention. This is just for general information purposes only. There are attorneys and accountants who can be agents to administer or advise on how to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program loan, and how to, and on the accountant side, how to put your numbers together in order to qualify for forgiveness. I am not an agent, and I don't intend to, at this point, become an agent. I think that the best thing for you to do is find an accountant who is an agent and speak with them about how best to manage your loan so that you get the maximum amount of forgiveness you can get. It's very important to make sure you're getting good advice on this, because, and I can talk more about this later, but lenders, so private banks are administering this program, and lenders have no basically liability in the ultimate outcome of the loan, whether it's forgiven or whether it actually is turned into a loan. So their goal is to give out the loan, which I understand that, and that's fine. But you, as the small business owner, you're going to be the one who's on the hook if you to pay back that loan if you haven't managed it correctly once it's been dispersed to you.
And there's two aspects. There's people who've already applied for it being concerned, what should I do? What if my employee, here, things I've heard is, what if my employees collected unemployment? I didn't know it. What is so forth. And then there's other people that are scared to apply for it because they're worried that they'll be stuck with more debt than they already have. I mean, they're rebuilding their business. Many are going 10 grand in debt just to make their restaurant safe or something. So right. I'd like to talk about both, and you pick which you want to start with.
Well, I kind of alluded to this at the beginning. Anytime legislation gets pushed through quickly, and I'm not saying that wasn't necessary in this case, but there are no guidelines to help folks know how to apply, whether or not it's a good idea for them to apply. In the beginning, I was contrasting the Paycheck Protection Program with the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which the first $10,000 of that is basically a grant that you would receive, right? And that's a whole different program, totally separate and apart from the Paycheck Protection Program. But I think that it's like anything else. The Paycheck Protection Program can be a great tool for you as long as you're getting good advice, as long as you understand what's contained in the program, how to put your numbers together, and how to, manage that the disbursement of those monies that you receive. I'm trying not to use language that's too lawyerly. You know, I want to be very plain English about it. How to spend that money in a way that's going to guarantee that you're not stuck paying this loan back. And Martin, you do raise a good point. A lot of people, when they started applying for this loan, thought, well, okay, it's going to be a 10-year repayment plan if I don't qualify for forgiveness. Well, then a guideline came out saying, no, you have 2 years to pay it back. So 24 months. And now, if that's been extended to 5, if I'm reading correctly from the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act that just came out last week. So for small business owners who are concerned about whether or not they should take out the loan, even though they really need it, I get it, and I completely understand. And my answer to that is make sure you understand what the rules are before you disperse any of those funds that you've received. So the best way to do that is to get in touch with an accountant. Now, there are also payroll providers like Gusto and ADP, things like that, who I'm pretty sure, I've heard, I actually don't pay payroll to anyone. I take draws myself, but I've heard from other people who pay payroll that those two programs, they are trying to make sure that they're covering the customers they have who they're managing payroll for. Mm-hmm. So, you know, get with your payroll provider, get with the person who's managing your books in that regard, get with your accountant, make sure that you know what you're doing as far as, you know, your disbursement of those funds, how you spend those funds, because that's changed too. It used to be 75-25, now it's 60-40. So things are changing pretty quickly. I don't anticipate any more legislation coming out anytime soon, but still, guidelines will continue to come out as this legislation gets a little age on it, because those guidelines from the Department of Treasury are how folks, you know, agents and lenders and things like that know what to do, how to administer the program. So as those guidelines come out, things will become more clear. But just it's safer to be more conservative and make sure that you are talking to someone who knows what they're talking about before you spend these funds.
So the thing is the steps that for education would be to go ahead and apply, and then but simultaneously find a trusted advisor to pay to make sure to double check you. Is that right? So I'm trying to build out the steps for someone that hasn't even applied yet.
Well, and I've also heard that some lenders are very good at educating the potential consumer, the small business owner who's the potential borrower. However, I would still suggest you find an accountant who can help you make sure that your numbers are on track. And it's going to be easier for people who already have accountants, obviously. But the other point that I do want to make is that these agents, so attorneys and accountants, and also the lenders, are paid out of the proceeds of your loan. So again, lenders are making money from all the loans that they're dispersing, and agents who are qualified are also getting paid out of the proceeds from your loan. So that's something to be aware of. You may not want to reduce your loan proceeds. I get that, but at the same time, the smart thing to do is to make sure you're getting good advice always. So, and also you did ask a question that the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act that was just passed last week sort of addresses. And there are circumstances where you can factor out employees who maybe are getting unemployment or have it. So when you're talking about the Paycheck Protection Program, what they're looking at is, have you maintained the number of employees and your payroll amount consistently throughout the 24-week period. Now, it was 8 weeks, now it's 24, that you have dispersed those funds. And the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act allows for changes in employees. And so I think you can kind of foresee that employees who have received unemployment will will be managed in some way in the guidelines that come out afterwards. So I'll be honest with you, this legislation just came out. I've read through it and I've been kind of trying to marinate on it for a little while, but I'm waiting for the guidelines to come out before I really start saying, here's what I think this means. here's incongruent, as a corollary to what it says in the legislation, because oftentimes the legislation is very sparse and the guidelines will help to flesh that out a little bit more. So I do think they are trying to address situations like that, maybe not legislatively, but in the guidelines that are coming, that will be forthcoming, I'm sure.
Right. So it looks like we're going to need to have another video probably in a week or so, which is fine by me. I mean, so I'm just looking at the business owners afraid, the business owners concerned I'm creating new debt. Any advice on how to kind of make sure the person they're getting advice from is giving good advice, because the business owner holds responsibility. If I say, well, the person I talked to gave me bad advice, I'm still on the hook. And so you might have some advice on how to pre-screen these people, because I'm still not feeling safe yet if I was a business owner and paranoid to even go for it. So I'm trying to take their perspective.
Okay, so this is why my suggestion with regard to pre-screening is, you're going to know, there are ways you can research whether or not you're going to a quality lender. Okay. They're going to have a track record that you can look at. And I strongly encourage you to research the lender that you you're thinking about using, right? And a lot of lenders, they were giving preference to clients who were already had accounts with the banks, right? So, that's one thing you can do, is you can just research that lender. I think that they are now going outside of their customer base and they are working with people who are not current clients of the bank. Just something to be aware of. Go out and research that lender before you decide, because there are some lenders who are already being investigated for different things. But do your due diligence as a customer and as a small business owner. Make sure that you are going to a reputable lender first and foremost, okay? And the second thing I would say is the quality of advice that you're given. That's why I believe it's a good idea to contact an agent an accountant or an attorney who is a qualified agent, because they have, I know as an attorney myself, I have a fiduciary duty to my client to represent them zealously within the bounds of the law, and to do my very best to give them accurate and correct advice. So that's my suggestion. That's why I advise looking for an agent who is qualified, because I know that there are hierarchies in place that require attorneys that you have a fiduciary duty to your clients to make sure you're advising them well. You have to be competent to represent them in the area. So, and I'm quite certain accountants have the same level of accountability through their own, like the state bar, et cetera. So that is why I would suggest getting advice from someone who's not a lender necessarily.
Because the lender has a monetary benefit to just get the money out. They don't have a monetary benefit, not that they couldn't be good people, but monetary benefit or legal requirement to make sure you are justified in taking that money and will be forgiven, right?
Right. And
I'm just being pragmatic, okay?
Well, yeah.
I grew up in DC. Follow the money, and then, trust comes second, and then
exactly.
Now you say an agent if I don't, what does an agent mean? You know, if it's just a CPA or an attorney, that may not be enough. What qualification am I looking for that they might be, that I can trust, that at least our current authority says they're responsible for giving accurate information? Because agent doesn't mean anything to me if I'm a hairstylist in a tiny town and I just barely know the functionality of my business.
Right. And that's an excellent question. So, first and foremost, the Paycheck Protection Program, the legislation, so the CARES Act, which contained the initial rules for the Paycheck Protection Program, authorized the Department of Treasury to qualify agents to advise borrowers, small business owners, on taking out Paycheck Protection Program loans, right? And so you need to be asking them, hey, or and I have not contacted the Department of Treasury to look into being an agent or if they have a list of qualified agents or et cetera. But I would think the Small Business Administration would have some pointers on that as well. I will be honest with you, I've been so busy reading legislation that I haven't.
Sure.
Yeah, that I haven't.
But I want to say maybe the chamber does. This is another, a lot of very good chambers are just battling as hard as they can because, their lights are kept on by those small business. They don't have a Duke Power or something to write them a big check like Raleigh does,
Right. But I would think that the primary resource for that, and the chamber might be a good resource for that too, but the primary resource for that would more than likely be through the Small Business Administration, because they are the ones who are posting all the guidelines that I'm looking at, et cetera. So you can get with your Small Business Administration office, and I wonder maybe SCORE too, but
they're working hard too. I'm a volunteer with SCORE, and there's also the Small Business Center, which I've trained in since 2006 as resources. But you're right. Let's go for a secondary validation source for someone that they believe is specializing in the nuances of, is it okay to use this for payroll protection or not? And are you going to have to pay it back?
Well, there have been so many issues. Well, first of all, if you have to pay it back, it's a 1% loan.
I see.
So that interest rate has not changed. The Flexibility Act didn't change that. So it is a low interest rate loan, and that's a great thing. Yeah. But, also there are so many conflicting explanations about how to calculate the funds that you're paying out over that 24-week period, and just, do you know what I mean? So it's and how does that 8-week initial period dovetail with the now extended 24-week period? Because there are loans that are not going to be affected by the Flexibility Act that was just passed. So if you took your loan out before that 8-week period still is going to apply to you. Do you know what I'm saying? So that Flexibility Act only applies to loans that are taken out after the enactment of the act. And I think it was signed into law on Friday, if I'm not mistaken. So you're still, let me be clear about that. There's still questions about how that's going to fit together. There are a lot of unanswered questions here. And I understand the nervousness on the part of the small business owner. But I still think that if you are managing, particularly if you have a very simple operation and it's not a complicated operation, it may be that the Paycheck Protection Program loan can bridge the gap for you until you're able to get back on stable financial ground with your business. So I don't want to discourage people from not investigating this as a good opportunity for their business, but I want to make sure that they're doing it responsibly. That's why, in my opinion, it's smart to find an agent. They're going to be paid out of the proceeds of your loan. It's smart to find an agent who can help you navigate this process and make the best possible choice for you and your business.
What is a normal rate for getting paid for it? Any ideas?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's a sliding scale.
Okay.
So I think it starts with 5%, and the higher the loan goes, the lower percentage.
I see. get
Yeah,
an
the
idea
lower
of it.
percentage
So
you
they're
get.
paid out of the money, but it's worth getting is what you're saying, because there's so many variables and moving pieces in it. I think one of the things I'm getting out of it is their intuition. Hold on. Their intuition of being concerned is grounded in some reality. Okay.
Well, yes,
Number
absolutely.
one. Number two, don't let it stop them from moving forward and doing it. Just get an advisor they trust and
Yes.
know that they have to be compensated to give time, and they're going to be compensated out of part of the money you get. That's okay. Number three is look at the situation and realize that worst case it's a 1%. Now, if you don't have an agent and you can't afford 1%, you might want to slow down and try to do some more research.
Right. That's excellent. Yes, I agree. Yeah.
And this is my playing small business. I've taught so many, it's easy to slip into their world,
Right.
where they're
Well, yes.
they're very educated in what they do, but they're not as educated in the other things, because many of them built up their business without a plan necessarily, and they just happen to get money coming in enough to keep going, and then they're learning these in retrospect. Not that I recommend that path, but that's how they're, I meet the restaurant was inherited or something like that. So
Right.
that's the thing. So the other question is that agent would probably help them understand. The other concern I've heard is, what if they're taking out unemployment and I'm paying them? Do I get in trouble with that? Anything you want to say about that, except refer and make sure you ask those questions? The agent might be a sufficient answer.
Well, I am not an employment law attorney.
Right.
I have never
Right.
been an employment law attorney.
Right.
But I think that the issue with that would be the Department of Labor is going to be watching for people who could conceivably go back to work. I mean, the goal is not to keep them on unemployment indefinitely. The unemployment is just intended to be a temporary measure to help folks stay afloat until they can get back to work.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're double dipping, which is what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
then and that you can document that, I think that the liability for that double dipping would not necessarily be on the part of the business owner if they're legitimately working.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The issue is being able to prove these things. Paper trails are going to be so important here,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that you can prove that the individual was working and you were paying them for work.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that as long as you have, as long as you have a paper trail showing you were acting ethically, right, then, and I think that the liability for that will fall to the employee ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it might be you're asking the person officially of, you might be getting some questions to ask the employee and documenting you ask those questions. It might be something like that,
Right.
and you at least document that.
Right. And I'm sure the Department of Labor, I'm sure the Department of Labor is going to be looking at that as well. I mean, right now, because there's been such a flood of people applying for unemployment, it's going to take them a little while to get their systems down. But I know that the goal is not to get people on unemployment and keep them there. The goal is just, that's a temporary measure so that they can get back to work and just to keep them financially afloat during that time period. So I really think that the smart thing to do would be to check with an employment law attorney who understands how unemployment insurance works. And the other thing is you could contact the North Carolina Department of Labor directly and talk with them about it as well. You could say, look, I want to know what your process is to determine if someone is still eligible for unemployment, and and what explain what your situation is and go from there.
And then the other thing is just kind of reiterating the idea of the Payroll Protection Act is so that you can keep people on the payroll, and it's okay to give them things to do. I mean, that's working. That's not
Right.
staying at home.
Right.
So, that would be some of them are using to upgrade the facilities as some of the activities. So understand your pay. I know this seems like it should be obvious, but I found it's not.
No.
Payroll protection is not unemployment stay at home. That's paying someone to actually work with your business. Now, you might be making face masks now and, or making meals that are donated to the hospital or
Right.
something, but it's actually to let you pay people to keep them working.
Exactly. Yes.
And
Right.
and so that's why I want to make sure it's not I'm paying them to stay home.
Well,
That's what unemployment's for. And I want to bring that up because it's so overwhelming. I've heard people even confused with that.
well, and that's a very good point, and that's why they go into, in the guidelines you'll read, they talk about the reasoning behind some of the rules. Say, for example, that 75-25 or now 60-40 split. So 60% of the loan proceeds you get are intended to pay payroll expenses. And so you need to know what payroll expenses are, et cetera. And then the remaining 40% can go to other expenses like, rent or utilities, things like that, to stay open so your employees actually have some place to work or a business to work from. So, if you read the guidelines are strongly pushing that idea that, yes, this loan is designed to help you pay payroll for a period of time so that people can work,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And for
Right.
them to know they are responsible to work.
Well, again, I think that you're right when you say it's not always obvious.
Yeah. Do you see what I mean? I mean that,
Yes. Yes.
what is it? Then that's another conversation of like
Right.
performance and everything else. So
Right.
certainly clear why they're so confused with it too.
Right. Yes.
And so the key would be, one, we get an advisor. Two, at least learn about it. Don't just be scared and don't sit there and do nothing, because
Absolutely.
there's
Yes.
real funds for small business. Work with your community, work with your chamber, work with your network, work with people you have trusted in your own community. And that's what, when I've
Excellent.
taught all over the state, they've got the chambers are, to me, the hub for the small business. That's number one. And then from there, they often are networking, knowing people. Now, their loyalties first is going to be people are a member of the chambers, but they're not going to recommend someone they think is dangerous and incompetent because it would reflect
Right.
on the chamber. So understand your system, and don't be afraid to not start learning and move. Just understand there are a lot of moving pieces. Don't try to understand it all yourself, is what I'm getting from this.
Exactly. And understand that if you get it right, this is a forgivable loan.
Yeah.
So that's a no-brainer. And I think that I think we as people, when we first heard, oh, it's a forgivable pot of money, people went off and were, like, grab that cash. Mm-hmm. But of course, there are going to be guidelines. And of course, you're going to need to vet your information. You're going to have to apply for forgiveness. You're going to have to make sure all your information, all your numbers line up so that you qualify for forgiveness. So, of course, there's no such thing as a free lunch. We know that. So that doesn't mean that there isn't a way to carefully explore this as an option for your business. And the last thing I want to say about that is you have until June 30th to apply for a Paycheck Protection Program loan. The legislation that came out last week did not change that. What they did was extend the period of time from where you have to disperse the proceeds from 8 weeks to 24, right? So you have until June 30th to apply for, a Paycheck Protection Program loan. And that's something I want to make sure everyone hears that loud and clear. So after June 30th, that's it.
That's it. And then also talk about what it means by disbursement. You have now from 8 to 24.
Okay. So for the initial round and the reason why last week they passed that new legislation is because the first 8-week period for the first recipients of the Paycheck Protection Program loan, that 8-week period was up last week, right? because I think it was April 3rd that the application went live. But so that would have been 8 weeks last week, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that 8-week period is the time period that you have to show you spent the money that you got, the loan that you got, correctly. 75% of it went to payroll, 25% of it went to the other qualifying expenses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now this new legislation that was just passed, if I'm reading it correctly, and I think I am, it has extended that 8-week period to 24 weeks.
Okay.
So once, of course, it's for this legislation applies, and there can also, the lender can agree to changes and et cetera, but that's very technical and complicated. We can talk about that later. But right now, for people who take out loans after the enactment of this act, you have 24 weeks to show that you spent that money, 60% for payroll expenses and 40% for other qualifying expenses. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right. So you need to, when you take out the loan, you need to be spending it, not putting it in the bank, not keeping it, but you have 24 weeks to get it spent for the new. The other is already done, correct? They don't overlap.
Well, that remains to be seen.
Oh, got it.
Okay.
Right.
So that there may be, because lenders can agree to, there's no prohibition for in the legislation that was just passed, there's no prohibition on lenders changing the agreement. Mm-hmm. So basically the contract. So let's see how that plays out before I make a specific comment on that.
Yeah, that's great to know. So again, it gets back, your situation might be different. Excellent.
Right. And so I do want to give one piece of advice that I have heard bandied about a little bit, and I think it's really good advice. In order for you to track the money that has been given to you, that's been dispersed to you, the loan, it might not be a bad idea for you to open a standalone bank account just for those proceeds, so that you have an easier time of tracking that money. Otherwise, commingling your funds might make it a little harder to track. So if you're going, and you must go through a lender, like a bank, right, in order to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program. And I would suggest opening a standalone bank account to make it easier to track those funds after they're actually dispersed to you.
Well, that's an excellent point, because most of us business owners understand the idea of commingling between a personal account and a business. But normally, if we got money to help our business, we might think that's safe to put in the same account. The biggest thing is, if people are confused, it's because it's confusing. It's like in social media. I remember I said, if you're not overwhelmed with all the changes in social media, then you are out of touch with reality. And this looks like another one of those domains. And
yes.
It's like an island changing its terrain all the time. And so don't not act, but act with good counsel.
Correct. Absolutely. Because now is the time we need assistance, we need help, we need small businesses, they need help.
Right. Right.
They need help. Even as the economy, as the state continues to open up, there are going to be people who still aren't going to go out, and it's going to take a long time before they feel comfortable and before the economy really gets up to full steam. And so small businesses are going to need lifelines right now. So, I myself will continue to educate myself about the Paycheck Protection Program and about anything that relates to that. And I'm talking about it on my platforms. I haven't talked about the Flexibility Act because normally I do my live video on Thursday nights, and this came out. It just came out that day. So I was scrambling. It's not very long, but still, I want to make sure I have a good handle on what's happening with the information before I even speak generally about it. So if you're watching my platforms and my content, then I'm going to be talking about it at some point. And until then, just make sure you're getting good counsel. I can't stress that enough. I really can't.
And I'll put all those links so they can follow you below. Well, Joy, thanks so much for your time. And if you'll just say on video also the best way they can get resources from you and learn, because you've got stuff from the individual to the business, and you just want no one to ever have to go to a bankruptcy attorney again. Is
Right, so
like you.
that's exactly right. Well, I have one excellent, what I believe is an excellent free tool that anyone can get access to right now, and that is my 10 creditor negotiation tips. And you can find that on my website, the home page of my website, which is newcashview.com. And it's the second thing on my website, so you can scroll down and see it. The other thing that I'm putting out, and I've just got to film the video for it. I am doing a financial first aid kit, and it's designed to help the consumer who is in has immediate financial issues. So that's going to be a little course that I'm going to put out, and I haven't quite decided. I'm thinking it's going to be coming out this week. And so if you're watching my social media programs, or if you're a member of my newsletter, you'll be notified of it shortly. So the other thing that you can do is you can buy books from my website. I have my Money Basics, Keeping It and Growing It.
Great
What I
book.
learned about money as a bankruptcy attorney. That's a book I wrote. You can get that on my website. It has pretty much basic financial literacy from A to Z. And, keep on top of my YouTube channel, particularly because I am always putting out new information there. And I do it with the eye of trying to take all these complicated issues and put them into a plain English format, so regular people, 99%ers, can understand it. So
Right.
that's where my heart is. I want to help, I want to help the little guys who are out there making this country chug forward every day.
Right. Excellent. Thanks so much for your time. Look forward to our next video. We'll probably schedule it right after this. And thanks for all you're doing to help people.
And thank you, Martin. I really appreciate it. Thanks for thinking of me.